IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. My name is Sudisha, and I work for the 20 Million Jobs Project at Takshashila Institution. And today I have with me Sridhar, who also works in the same project. Together, we try to paint a picture of what India would be like if we had 20 million jobs every year. Today, we are going to talk about unemployment in Goa. Lately, there has been news around average unemployment in Goa being more than the national average. And we wanted to look into the reasons why that's happening and how that can be improved. So, as of now, unemployment rate in India stands at 7.8%. After having stabilized between 5.5% and 6% since 1991. Now, youth unemployment rate across the country has risen from 16.5% in 1991 to over 23% today. The problem with Goa is that the fact that it's the smallest state in the country does not do anything about its unemployment. It's quite unmanageable, which should not happen for the smallest state in India. Right now, the average unemployment in Goa is around 15.5%, which has increased in the last 3 months from 11.6% according to CMIE. So, Sridhar, I want to ask you, what are some of the reasons why you think this is happening?
Hey, hi Sudisha. Thanks. Yeah, it's a very important subject, right? We have been talking about rising unemployment across India. It's gone up, like you said, from about 5.5%, 6% that it sort of stayed at since 1991. But now at 7.8%, it seems to be getting a lot of attention. And it's important for us also to understand that you should look at unemployment rate in India in conjunction with the labor force participation rate, which has also been falling across the country. So therefore, the total number of people employed in this country has really fallen quite significantly, and it's cause for concern. And one would expect that a small state like Goa should be able to handle these issues with much greater ease than the larger states. Today, Goa is the fifth lowest in terms of employment, as in the unemployment rate in Goa is only better than 4 other states, Haryana, Rajasthan, Bihar, and Jammu and Kashmir. So these 5 states, Haryana, Rajasthan, Bihar, Jammu and Kashmir, and Goa, have more than 15% unemployment. And there are some other states like Assam, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and even Odisha, which have less than 2% unemployment, right? So it's definitely possible for us to have a much better number in Goa. And why is unemployment in Goa so high? I think it wasn't so bad always, right? In 2017, for instance, unemployment rate in Goa was a manageable 7.7%. But with the mining ban, which happened in 2018, following a Supreme Court ruling, everything changed. So the mining industry in Goa used to employ over 80,000 people directly, and indirectly, it employed almost 2 lakh. So it was a significant contributor to employment in a state which has just 1.5 million population, right? So when you have a population of 1.5 million people and you have some 2 lakh jobs going away, by the stroke of the pen, it changes things quite drastically. And that's what happened in Goa, right? And coupled with that, and then right at the back of this mining ban, when people were struggling through all this, then you had COVID-19. And the other big industry that Goa dependent on was tourism, and tourism came to a standstill. So between these two, Goa has had it really hard. While tourism has returned, the mining ban persists. So that's where we are with respect to Goa. You want to say something else on this subject?
I mean, we've discussed before that there are more reasons apart from the mining ban, it being the main one, and the fact that COVID-19 really exacerbated all the issues that were there with tourism in the first place. There are other reasons that we'll look into, but let's talk about the mining ban for a bit and the fact that it's so important in Goa, right? There has been a ban on it for the past 5 years, and even though there are companies that are fighting against it, fighting for it, for that ban to be over, there are politicians who are saying that this should not be done for environmental protection. So this is a very complex situation. And
Yeah, the reason the ban happened, let's just come back to the reason the Supreme Court took this decision, right? So the Portuguese, I mean, if you go back in history, the mining leases that some 88 different leases were in operation just at the time of the ban. And these leases were all given by the Portuguese, right? These were provided by the Portuguese, but they were supposed to expire in 2007. And the government, state government, subsequently has been renewing these leases. And the Supreme Court held that the subsequent renewals by the state government were illegal. And there's a group called Goa Foundation, and they have been at the forefront of this struggle and this aim to ban mining in Goa. And so they won that case in the Goa Foundation versus Cesar Sterlite. And the Supreme Court had invalidated the renewals and as it stood before the 2015 Amendment Act and held that the tenure of the leases ended on November 22nd, 2007. This judgment was authored by Justice Madan on behalf of himself and Justice Deepak Gupta, and both of whom subsequently retired. But the second renewal of the mining leases granted by the state of Goa was unduly hasty. That is what the ruling continues to say, without taking all relevant material into consideration and ignoring available relevant material, and therefore not in the interests of the mining mineral development. So basically, they are saying that these renewals and these leases that were on were all illegal, and those people had to sort of give up those leases. But mining could still happen, right? I mean, what do you think of that?
yeah, I think that it should happen for a state like Goa, which only has 3 to 4 main industries. It has mining, it has fisheries, tourism, and maybe a few startups that are sprouting up in Goa, which is another problem with that, which we'll come back to that later. But I think that it's really the need of the hour, and that something needs to be done about it. And I've seen politicians speaking up against the environmental problem associated with it. That's great, but what other option is there? What alternatives are you suggesting? So one of the alternatives can be that, Goa can also be a startup hub, but Goa has a huge power shortage. There are industries that have tried to penetrate the Goan market and they've tried to establish their offices there, but the truth remains that Goa has a huge power shortage and industries can't really sustain there. So we need to capitalize on what industries are already there. You want
Yeah, I think so. And I think the government in power today, as well as the main opposition party, the Congress, are all in agreement that mining should resume in Goa. But for this to happen, they have to now have a transparent auctioning process. They'll have to now ensure that those people who had those 88 mining leaseholders 3 days ago, for instance, they've received a notice from the state government asking them to vacate their leases. And the state government plans to include these in the first list of leases to be auctioned, right?
Mhm.
So the state government now plans to create fresh auctions for all the mining leases in Goa. So that's the first step that the government is going to do. In order to do that, they have also created a mineral development corporation. And this mineral development corporation is now planning to first take over all these lease locations and then hand them over to the winners of the new auction. So that's what's going to happen. And if that does happen, and I don't know what all cases go on, if some of the incumbent leaseholders do not win in the next round of auctioning, I'm sure there will be fresh cases to be dealt with. And so we'll have to see. But I think at least the government has plans to start mining again in Goa.
Yeah. And now let's look at some other reasons. So I was reading that one of the major reasons and one of the major issues in Goa right now is that outsiders have a good amount of liberty to come there and take over the businesses of the indigenous population there. And it's actually a big issue. So what's happening is that, and this stat may be incorrect, but I read very recently that around 50% of the tourism related or maybe even hospitality related businesses that you see in Goa are not from the people who are actually born there and who belong to that state. It's actually the outsiders. So what's that creating is, I would say, an environment of hostility. And Goans are actually purposefully choosing to move abroad, even if they have to do menial jobs like being a waiter or just sitting at a gas station and doing all that. So I think that this is another issue that needs to be solved. Maybe for, let's say, Himachal. A good example is Himachal Pradesh, wherein even the people who live there, they have strong laws protecting them.
Yeah, I think we should discuss this. But before that, let's take a short break.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Piyush Gupta, president of Keystone, talks to Varun about how his experimental marketing agency is helping brands get on the metaverse. On Voices for Water, Karthik is joined by Dr. Anju Gaur, Senior Water Resource Management Specialist. Together, they navigate the landscape of Indian water data. On Pulyabazi, Pranay and Saurabh dig into why exactly the taxes on petrol are so high. On Ek Chuski Finance, Priyanka tells us how we can avoid taking a financial risk. And on Marathi Kirkitun, the Deshmukhs explore the beauty of the Devanagari font on the occasion of Akshaya Tritiya. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're following this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Word of mouth is one of our biggest, most helpful things you can do for us. We'd really appreciate that. And also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening on. And you can also check us out on YouTube. Go check out ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. You get a list of all of our YouTube channels there. We're also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and the advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It's at ivmpodcast.com/survey. This really helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors for this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app.
Yeah, coming back. Right. I think you were talking about, protection for jobs to locals. And I think we have to understand that all Indians have a right to move from one city to another, from one state to the other, and go looking for jobs and work where the jobs are. So that's how it's going to be. I mean, we are in one of our earlier podcasts on the subject of 20 million jobs. We were recommending that if India cannot provide jobs to all the people that it's got, then maybe India should actively pursue emigration of some of its population to other countries where jobs are available. That's how it's always has been, and that's how it's always going to be, right? We can have some artificial protection for some local people in some states, but eventually, I mean, we are one country, and it should be perfectly all right for people to move from one part of the country to another and go and work. So I'm not a big fan of protection for people of one particular state and like favoring them over another and so on. So that's my personal view, but I understand where these people are coming from, and I understand that there could be some hostility on account of that. The solution to this, in my opinion, is that there should be so many jobs available that if there are more jobs than people, and therefore more people, that this kind of resentment will not be there, right? It's only because there are so few jobs that this kind of issue of, oh, I am a Goan and you're not a Goan, etc., is coming into play. So once mining comes back, and if the government actually manages to do it and allows transparent auctioning process to take place, I'm confident that mining will resume in Goa. The other area that's important is, I think you alluded to the fact that Goa can be a good startup hub. And that's true in many ways, right? I mean, if you look at Bangalore, where I'm based, and I look at why is Bangalore such a successful startup hub? Bangalore is a great place for people from from all over the country to come. It attracts people. It's got great weather. It's got a cosmopolitan feel to it. Goa has a cosmopolitan feel to it. At the same time, it also has these beautiful beaches and many other things to do when you're not working, right? So it can attract people to come there. But there are some infrastructure issues that you and I were talking about a little earlier about how there's inadequate infrastructure, especially in terms of power, that's needed for many businesses to survive there and do well. But be that as it may, there could be many industries which do not require very high, which are not dependent on a lot of power and are not power intensive and therefore could survive. It could be a good place for some technology startups to sort of work out of. And so that's an interesting idea. And I'm told that the state government has invited a few venture capital firms to come to Goa, offering them some special facilities and suggesting that they spearhead a startup revolution in Goa. I wish them great success, but I don't know. I think it's going to take a while before it becomes successful, but it looks like an interesting idea, definitely. The other area, of course, is fisheries. And I think like there is some amount of work to be done there in order to ensure that fishing can take place in a sustainable fashion. And there's always this whole struggle between small boat owners and large boat owners, etc., when it comes to fishing. And so, but that's a very potentially a good place for Goa to do well in, right? So I think fishing can be something that Goa can focus on. But more than anything else, all of us know Goa is this great tourism destination. Everybody from around the world knows Goa. They know Agra, they know the Taj Mahal, and then they know Goa, right? So it's how popular Goa is. And but India just doesn't get the kind of tourists that other countries get. Do you want to sort of tell us why do you think India doesn't get the number of tourists that it ought to?
Yeah. So there are many reasons why, but before that, I want to talk about a few numbers that I read recently, which were that when a foreign tourist visits India, they spend a lot more than other countries. But India is not able to get a high number of tourists. So if that were the case, that we do elevate the kind of services that we offer to tourists or the facilities that we offer to tourists, there's a good chance that we'll earn a high amount of revenue, because when people come to India, they take their time, they stay, they explore the place, they tend to spend a lot higher than other countries. Another interesting thing that I read was that the issue with Indian tourism is that it's a very complex thing, right? There are many problems which are contributing to low tourism in India. So one of them is there's obviously a safety issue, that we are not really able to cater to the demands of, let's say, female travelers, the kind of experience that they're looking for. It's even in Goa, I've read multiple cases where it's extremely unsafe for women to, go to the beaches at night. It's kind of experience they might be looking for, but we are not able to offer them. Another issue is that there's obviously an infrastructure problem. Like even today, I took a road trip and I was coming back, and this is a very developed area, right? But there were no street lights. It's a basic facility that we need in this country, but we do not have it. So that's another problem. And the fact that, our roads, and I think it has improved a lot over the years, but we still need better roads. We still need cleanliness. When we invite foreign tourists, we need places that are sanitary, especially after COVID-19, when, people are using sanitizers and they're washing their hands. They're very particular about cleanliness. It doesn't make sense for them to invite to, let's say, Delhi, which is extremely unclean. Like I've lived in Delhi for so many years, and even I don't want to go there because it's really bad. So I think for tourists to come to India, we need to take care of these things. And obviously, there's a disparity in the amount of money that Indians spend and the foreigners spend. So let's say there's a park or something. And for us, if the entry fee is 50, for foreigners, it's 500. And then we obviously do not have an organized way of commute. Fathers have to haggle with the auto walas and they have to haggle with cab drivers and all of that thing. If I were a foreigner, I think it
Yeah,
would be a terrible experience for me.
that is true. I think India does have. So I think when we look at numbers, right? I mean, so India gets about 10, 11 million tourists every year compared to, I mean, the UK gets, I mean, London gets over 25 million tourists a year, right? I mean, all of India, and we just get 10 million. And even that 10 million is like a more recent, it's a recent phenomenon. It's after the government has taken a lot of steps to sort of attract tourists. There is a very strong perception of India not being safe. And especially after that Nirbhaya case, etc., in 2012, there was a marked drop in number of foreign tourists to India. So that's one. One is the perception of it not being safe. And we need to do something to fix that. I think the state governments have to take a lot of steps to make India not just safe, they need to create a perception of that safeness. People should feel safe. I don't know the statistics, and I don't believe that the number of attacks on tourists in India is much higher than in some other place. But the number of small crimes that happen, the number of the eve teasing that happens, and various other things that happen in India creates a perception of it not being safe. And that needs to be addressed very seriously. The second aspect you mentioned, you talked about hygiene, and I think that's very, I don't think Indians by themselves are like, we're not dirty. Right? We are actually, we have clean homes. We are quite particular about hygiene. Our personal hygiene is not any worse than people in the developed countries. But when it comes to public hygiene and public practices, I think we do find ourselves wanting. And so I think our garbage disposal mechanisms in our cities is just absolutely awful. And that's something that we need to fix. And we are working at it. I think the Swachh Bharat mission has at least shine a light on this problem, right? Is shining a light on this problem and is hoping that, things can get a little better. We do have some public toilets today, which we did not have in the past. I think today, if you stop at a toll plaza and try to use the toilets there, they are usable. They're not like as awful as they have been in the past. And so that's got better. I think it's another problem that foreigners have coming into India is getting a visa. It's not been very easy for people to get a visa to visit India. And recently, India has increased the number of countries for which an e-visa is available or visa on arrival is possible. So I think things are getting better, but we should make it much easier and painless for people to get a visa to come into our country. The infrastructure in our country, I think the connectivity between different cities, the roads, the trains, the quality of buses, etc., needs a lot of improvement. And if you want to attract high spending tourists, then you need to be able to provide an infrastructure that they have come to expect in more developed markets. So I think that's important. Then the monuments themselves. I think we've got fantastic monuments, right? In terms of just the sheer number and quality and the age of those monuments, I think it's quite unparalleled. But the way they are maintained, the way the access to them is managed, leaves much to be desired. And that's something that we need to do. I'm not so bothered about the fact that we charge 500 rupees to somebody from another country and we charge 50 rupees or 5 rupees or 10 rupees to somebody from India. I have seen that even when I traveled in Europe, and I've seen that your EU citizens get charged a different rate for entry to museums compared to people from other countries. If developed and affluent countries can offer discounts to their own citizens, then why not a poor country like India? So I think that's something people may not mind, but we must not just charge people more, we should offer value. I think that's important. So if we can do that, so I think with the union government focusing on the visas, the marketing, creating a good image of India abroad, and ensuring connectivity between cities and all that, so that will help. The state government should look at also marketing their own states more effectively. Kerala has done a good job in creating and doing a lot of marketing. and like provide more care about safety and licenses also, right? For more infrastructure, hotels, restaurants, bars, all these places should be easy to set up. So that's important. And private individuals, all of us need to be ambassadors for the state, right? We need to be ambassadors of our country. If like somebody comes from another country and comes to our country, we need to talk to them nicely. We need to make them feel comfortable. We need to make them feel welcome. And I think if we do that and improve their experience, I feel that, India can get 5 times or even 10 times the number of tourists that we have today. Today, it accounts for about 7%, 5 to 7% of India's GDP. And it can really, its share can go up quite significantly if we do some of the right things.
Yeah. And not for this discussion, but I think that one of the things that's it's appearing is that what Goa really needs right now is an upskilling plan. So when you look at the fact that they've not been able to capitalize on the few industries that they have, and the fact that outsiders are so easily able to enter the state and take over their industries and estates, I think that what Goa really needs right now is an upskilling plan. There should be skill development among the people who are there so that the youth at least doesn't have lower self-esteem issues and they don't feel disillusioned, which causes a lot of problems. So one of them is that Goa has a huge drug problem. And this should not be happening. If you're busy, you don't really get time to, indulge in all these activities. So I think that if the government introduces skill development programs, it can really benefit Goa, and I think that we can see the unemployment rate reduce. And yeah, I'm sure you have to.
Absolutely. I think skills are very critical across our country and definitely in Goa as well. And there has been constant, while we've been doing research on the subject of 20 million jobs, we've always come across situations where we feel that more businesses would hire more people if only the right skills were available. So while we have on one side a looming unemployment problem, we also have on the other side a skills shortage. So I think skilling is a very important solution across the country. And like we said, I think if we want to solve Goa's unemployment problem, fixing this mining issue, getting the leases on, getting new leases, having some transparent auctioning method, etc., done quickly will help do that. We've got to make sure that this mining happens in environmentally sustainable fashion. Otherwise, it's not something that's going to continue for a long time. There will be enough groups which are going to protest, and rightly so, and mining may come to a halt again. But if Goa is to have a longer term view, the short term might be to solve this mining crisis, but the longer term view solution for Goa is going to be around tourism and getting their power situation and infrastructure problems sorted so that they can be a great hub for startups. That's my view.
Yeah, and my hope is that we do not have to discuss the next time for the smallest state in India to have an unemployment crisis. That should not be happening.
Yeah, but it's something that can be solved, and it will.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
This was great. I think it is a problem that we will see, and we will get it. We will see in the next few years. We will see this problem being solved. I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, so am I. Thank you for joining, Sridhar. Thanks to anyone who listened to the podcast.
Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
If you're a cricket fan, check out Edges and Sledges, India's favorite cricket podcast.
The podcast focuses on Indian cricket, the IPL, and has a ton of banter both on and off the field. We talk about the week's biggest cricket stories with current and ex-international cricketers, coaches, or sometimes just between us.
And it's hosted by me, DJ.
Me, Varun.
And me, Ashwin.
New episodes release every week.
You can catch us on the IVM Podcast's website, app,
or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa Paisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM Podcast app or the website or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.